The hall fell silent the moment the fleet icons changed color. Red vectors replaced blue on the holographic map, marking hostile trajectories converging on the inner academic ring. For most species present, it was an abstract exercise, another historical simulation meant to teach restraint, failure, and hubris. For the humans quietly embedded within the galactic compact, it was something else entirely. It was a countdown. Professor Zalari Venn did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Authority, in her species, was not volume but certainty. Her 6 eyes tracked the shifting symbols with calm precision as she addressed the assembled audience. "Observe," she said. This was the final phase. When the coalition fleets arrived, the Sol 3 civilization had already fractured. Their defenses were outdated. Their coordination insufficient. A ripple of faint amusement moved through the tiered seating. Some students adjusted their cybernetic limbs. Others recorded notes through retinal implants. The consensus was comfortable. This was a lesson about inevitability. Elias Ward sat among them, hands resting loosely on his knees, posture relaxed in a way that only came from long familiarity with worse rooms and sharper dangers. His hair had more gray than when the photo was taken. His face carried lines earned rather than inherited, but his eyes remained steady, attentive, calculating. The humans, Zalari continued, are classified as a cautionary case. A species that achieved rapid technological ascent without the cultural patience to survive it. The word patient lingered. Elias allowed himself the smallest inward smile. The map zoomed closer, revealing orbital debris fields and shattered satellite arrays. A stylized representation of defeat. Several alien cadets nodded approvingly. "Impressive that they lasted as long as they did," murmured a Cathari officer in training, mandibles clicking softly. "No centralized doctrine. No unified command." "An extinction driven by inefficiency," another replied. "Predictable." Professor Zalari paused the simulation. "There is," she said, "one unresolved inconsistency." The pause stretched just long enough to tighten curiosity. This civilization left no surrender record, no evacuation signatures, no final broadcast. Entire populations vanished without the expected cascade of refugee vectors. She turned slightly, her gaze sweeping the hall. For 4 centuries, historians have debated whether this was incompetence or intent. The display shifted. The battlefield vanished, replaced by a still image. Flat, static, almost quaint. A group of young humans stood before an old stone structure, dressed in dark academic robes. They looked tired, proud, alive. At the center of the image stood a man with familiar eyes. Elias Ward. The reaction was immediate and unrestrained. "That is impossible," someone said aloud. "Metadata," demanded another. "Verify the timestamp." "Humans are extinct," a third voice snapped. "We have treaties based on that assumption." Professor Zalari raised a limb, and the noise subsided into a brittle hush. "The image was retrieved from a probe lost beyond compact space," she said. "Its archival encryption predates 3 modern empires. The timestamp has been verified by 6 independent systems." She turned fully now, all 6 eyes fixing on Elias. Less than 30 standard years old. The room shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Chairs angled away from him. Defensive instincts engaged. Theoretical extinction had just acquired a pulse. Elias stood. Not abruptly. Not defiantly. He rose the way a seasoned officer might rise when addressed by a superior. Calm, deliberate, aware that every movement carried meaning. "Yes," he said before the question was finished forming. His voice was even, unforced. "That's me." A low hiss escaped somewhere in the upper tiers. Professor Zalari studied him with something that had moved beyond academic curiosity. "Mr. Ward," she said, "you were admitted under the Exchange Accord as a cultural artifact specialist. You declared your species non-sovereign." "That is correct." "And yet," she continued, gesturing to the image, "this lecture concerns a civilization that supposedly vanished centuries ago. Can you explain why your graduation photograph appears in a classified historical archive? Elias met her gaze. For a moment, he considered the room, not as a collection of students and scholars, but as future admirals, ministers, and strategists. Beings who would soon decide policy based on what they believed about humanity. He chose his words carefully. Because, he said, you've been studying the wrong failure. A ripple of confusion passed through the hall. The assumption, Elias continued, is that humanity collapsed. That we fractured, exhausted our resources, and disappeared. He paused, letting the silence work for him. What actually happened, he said, was withdrawal. Several translators hesitated, recalibrating. Professor Zalari narrowed her eyes. Withdrawal implies intent. It does, Elias replied. It also implies survival. The holographic map flickered briefly, as if responding to an unspoken command. You see a battlefield, Elias said, nodding toward the frozen simulation. We saw a forecast. Our analysts ran projections centuries ahead. Every pathway was stayed visible ended the same way, absorbed, controlled, or annihilated. He glanced around the hall. So we did what humans have always done when outmatched. And what is that? Someone asked sharply. Elias allowed himself a faint, humorless smile. We planned. The word landed heavier than any threat. Professor Zalari straightened. If this is a deception. It isn't, Elias said. And you're about to find out why. Somewhere beyond the lecture hall, far from academic maps and historical projections, a silent human fleet adjusted its coordinates, waiting for a signal that had been centuries in the making. The galaxy, comfortable in its assumptions, had just begun to notice the gap. No alarm sounded after Elias Ward's words, but the room had changed all the same. Professor Zalari dismissed the class with a gesture that was meant to look procedural. It fooled no one. Conversations broke out in low, urgent tones as students filed from the hall, many casting guarded glances back at the human. Some did so with curiosity, others with calculation. Elias remained where he was until the last of them left. You have disrupted a sealed academic narrative, Zalari said once the door slid shut. The translation field rendered her tone neutral, but Elias had learned enough foul nuance to hear the tension beneath it. That carries consequences. It always does, Elias replied. That's usually how truth behaves. She studied him for several seconds. You implied intent behind humanity's disappearance. Withdrawal on a civilizational scale is not a decision made lightly. No, Elias agreed. It's made when the alternatives are worse. Zalari motioned toward the central console. The hologram shifted again, this time showing long-range projections, galactic expansion curves, resource acquisition arcs, the slow but unmistakable pressure of empire. You are aware, she said, that the compact strategic models predicted human extinction with a 98% probability. Elias leaned slightly on the rail, his posture relaxed but alert. Your models assumed we would keep playing. A pause. Playing. Expansion. Visibility. Competition. He tapped the rail lightly. Humans learned early that the fastest climber is the first target. So we stopped climbing. Zalari's eyes narrowed. You are suggesting a coordinated retreat beyond observable space. I'm suggesting layered concealment, Elias corrected. Technological, cultural, psychological. We dismantled our signature infrastructure, fragmented our political presence, and left just enough debris to sell the story. To whom? She asked. To everyone, Elias said. Including you. Silence followed, dense with implication. You expect the council to believe, Zalari said slowly, that an entire species voluntarily erased itself from the galactic stage. Not erased, Elias said. Archived. He straightened. We didn't disappear to survive the past. We disappeared to prepare for the future. Zalari turned back to the display, calling up historical data, trade records, first contact reports, early human broadcasts full of optimism and noise. These records show division, she said. Conflict. Near constant internal struggle. Elias nodded. That part was real. She looked back at him, startled. Humans argue, Elias said. We fight. We fail publicly. That's not weakness, it's how we stress test ideas. By the time we realized the galaxy was watching, we'd already learned how dangerous attention could be. You speak as if you anticipated the compact, Zalari said. We anticipated something like it, Elias replied. Large systems always converge on control. It's efficient. It's logical. And eventually, it leaves no room for species that value autonomy. Zalari's gaze sharpened. And yet you are here, visible. Yes, Elias said. Because the concealment phase ended. That earned him a long, assessing stare. Explain, she said. Elias drew a slow breath. Your fleets are moving. Not toward us, toward what you believe are unclaimed regions. The same regions we quietly settled. You think you're expanding into silence. Zalari's fingers hovered over the console. If this is true, you've placed humanity in direct violation of compact expansion law. Elias smiled faintly. Only if you assume we're subject to it. That assumption underpins galactic stability. So did the assumption that humans were extinct, Elias said evenly. Zalari's eyes flicked to the sealed doors. There are admirals on this station. I know, Elias said. Some of them trained on simulations built from our old data. They think they understand us. And they don't. They understand the version of humanity that wanted to be seen. He stepped closer to the display and keyed in a sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the hologram shifted, new vectors appearing, subtle at first. Hidden infrastructure nodes. Faint but deliberate patterns. Zalari inhaled sharply. These are concealed mass signatures. Passive, Elias said. Cold. No emissions. You wouldn't look for them unless you knew exactly where to look. You're telling me, Zalari said carefully, that while the galaxy debated your extinction, humanity built an invisible civilization. Not invisible, Elias replied. Selective. She turned to him. Why reveal this now? Elias met her gaze. Because your expansion fleets will cross our perimeter in less than 48 hours. And if they do, they'll encounter defenses designed by people who assumed they would be underestimated, Elias said. Again. Zalari was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, what do you want? Elias considered the question. Recognition, he said. Boundaries. And the chance to speak before someone makes a mistake that can't be undone. And if the council refuses? Elias's expression remained calm, but something hard settled behind his eyes. Then, he said, the galaxy will learn why we chose patience over pride. Outside the lecture hall, unseen by scholars and students alike, encrypted channels lit up, human signals threading through the void, awakening systems that had never forgotten their purpose. The lesson, it seemed, was no longer theoretical. The council chamber did not resemble a place where wars were decided. It was too clean, too balanced, its curved walls inlaid with symbols meant to suggest continuity rather than conflict. That, Elias knew, was deliberate. Violence felt easier to authorize when it appeared orderly. He stood alone at the center platform, while representatives of 14 species observed from elevated arcs. Some were physically imposing, others frail, but augmented by layers of cybernetics. All of them carried authority backed by fleets. Professor Zalari remained near the periphery, officially an observer, unofficially the reason Elias was still breathing. The human delegate will clarify his claims, announced the presiding moderator, a triune whose three voices spoke in unsettling harmony. You have asserted that humanity persists beyond recorded space, and that compact expansion risks unintended engagement. That's correct, Elias said. You have also admitted, another counselor interjected, to long-term deception on a civilizational scale. Elias inclined his head. I prefer the term strategic non-disclosure. A few counselors reacted with what passed for humor among their kind. Others did not. You expect us to believe, said Admiral Kresh of the Vraxian Combine, his armored form leaning forward, that while the galaxy advanced, humans hid in the dark and somehow surpassed us. No, Elias said. I expect you to understand that advancement isn't always loud. Kresh's mandibles flexed. Our scouts detected nothing. That's because you were scanning for presence, Elias replied. We optimized for absence. A ripple of irritation passed through the chamber. You speak confidently for a species without a seat, the triune moderator said. Elias nodded. That was intentional too. With a subtle gesture, he activated the projection field. The familiar galactic map appeared, then stripped itself of color and ornamentation until only mass distributions and gravitational contours remained. Your expansion doctrine, Elias said, favors efficiency. Straight lines. Predictable growth vectors. You avoid irregular zones because they complicate logistics. Several counselors shifted. That much was true. We settled those zones, Elias continued. Not by conquering them, but by integrating with their limitations. Low-energy habitats. Distributed manufacturing. No centralized targets. The map populated with faint points, barely visible unless one knew how to look. That's impossible, Kresh snapped. Such dispersion sacrifices output. Elias met his gaze. It sacrifices speed, not resilience. The triune moderator conferred briefly with its counterparts. If this is accurate, your people possess a hidden industrial base. Yes, Elias said. One that doesn't collapse when a single node is destroyed. And your military? Asked another counselor. Surely that, too, was reduced. Elias allowed himself a thin smile. We learn from history. Standing armies invite preemptive strikes. The projection shifted again. What appeared was not a fleet in the traditional sense. No tight formations. No imposing silhouettes. Instead, the map showed scattered objects, asteroids, debris fields, dormant platforms. They don't look like warships, Kresh scoffed. They aren't, Elias said, until they need to be. He gestured, and the scattered objects rearranged themselves in simulation, coalescing, interlocking, activating systems that had been in note for decades. Their components are modular, Elias explained. Civilian by design. Agricultural frames convert to armor. Mining lasers ruline into directed energy arrays. Every asset has a second purpose. The chamber fell quiet. You turned your economy into a weapon, the triune said. We turned survival into a habit, Elias replied. A junior counselor spoke up, voice edged with disbelief. If you are so prepared, why reveal yourselves at all? Why not let our fleet stumble into your defenses? Elias's expression sobered. Because someone would misinterpret restraint as weakness. And then people would die who didn't need to. Professor Zalari watched him closely. She saw the calculation, but also something else. An insistence on choice. Admiral Kresh leaned back. You expect us to halt expansion based on unverified projections and a single human's testimony. You don't have to, Elias said. You can continue as planned. That earned him a sharp look. And if we do? Elias inhaled slowly. Your forward elements will be isolated. Not destroyed, disabled. Their command networks will be dismantled, their propulsion counted, their crews returned unharmed. Kresh barked a harsh laugh. You threaten us with mercy. I'm describing outcomes, Elias said calmly. Threats are emotional. This is logistical. The triune moderator raised a limb. You claim certainty. I claim preparation, Elias replied. We ran these scenarios centuries ago. You were one of the most stable outcomes. That was not the reassurance it might have been. Silence settled over the chamber, heavy with recalculations. Finally, the moderator spoke. If humanity's intent is coexistence, why remain hidden for so long? Elias looked around the room, at beings who had never needed to doubt their place in the stars. Because, he said, we wanted to meet the galaxy when we could afford to say no. Outside the chamber, compact fleets continued their advance, unaware that every kilometer forward reduced their margin for error. For the first time in centuries, the balance of power rested not on who could strike hardest, but on who had planned the longest. The first compact scout vessel crossed the projected boundary at precisely the time Elias had predicted. It did not explode. It did not vanish. That, in itself, unsettled the observers watching from command centers light years away. The ship's telemetry began to drift, subtly at first. Course corrections lagged. Thruster output failed to match input. Navigation systems disagreed with one another by fractions of a degree that should not have mattered, yet compounded with every second. On the bridge of the scout vessel, its captain ordered diagnostics. Systems reported nominal performance. That was the problem. In a hidden operations hub buried within a dim red dwarf's gravity shadow, human analysts watched the data scroll in silence. No cheers. No celebration. This was not victory. It was confirmation. Phase 1 interference holding, a technician reported. Gravitational noise within projected tolerances. Elias stood behind them, hands clasped, eyes on the composite display. The compact scout drifted another degree off course, then another. Maintain passive posture, he said. No escalation. Yes, sir. Across the network, compact commanders argued. It's a malfunction, one insisted. Pull the ship back. Negative, another replied. We've checked the models. There's nothing there. That sentence, nothing there, repeated often in the following hours. As additional scouts entered the region, the effect spread. Communications suffered fractional delays. Sensor returns smeared at the edges. No single failure was dramatic enough to justify retreat, but together they created uncertainty. And uncertainty was poison to doctrine built on precision. In the council chamber, Admiral Kresh watched the reports accumulate with mounting irritation. This is harassment, he snapped. Electronic warfare. Professor Zalari shook her head. There are no emissions. Then how? They are not attacking your systems, she said. They are reshaping the environment your systems rely on. Kresh turned sharply. That distinction is academic. It's strategic, Zalari replied. And you are reacting exactly as they expected. The realization settled slowly, uncomfortably. Human interference did not announce itself. It did not demand response. It merely eroded confidence. Fleets designed to project power found themselves hesitating, commanders second-guessing data that should have been absolute. Elias had warned them. In the Human Operations Hub, a new alert appeared. Compact task force adjusting posture, an analyst said. They are tightening formation. Increased sensor overlap. Elias nodded. They are trying to brute force clarity. Will it work? For a moment, Elias said. Then they'll lose flexibility. He stepped closer to the display, eyes narrowing as new vectors appeared. Initiate Phase 2. Limited reveal. The technicians exchanged glances, then complied. Across the contested region, something changed. Passive asteroids began to move, not quickly, not dramatically, but with unmistakable intent. Objects previously catalogued as inert debris altered trajectories by fractions of a degree, aligning into patterns that no natural process would produce. Compact sensors lit up with warnings. Mass signatures reclassifying. A voice barked over an open channel. Those aren't rocks. Confirm weapons. Negative. Weight, energy spikes. No, modulation. The channel dissolved into confusion. The asteroids unfolded. Panels slid back. Agricultural frames rotated. Mining arrays reoriented, their power systems rerouted with surgical precision. What emerged were not warships in any conventional sense, but something more unsettling. Tools repurposed, systems adapted, infrastructure revealing its second life. Human doctrine made visible. In the council chamber, silence replaced argument. They turned logistics into leverage, Zalari said quietly. Admiral Kresh stared at the display. That's not a fleet. No, she agreed. It's an ecosystem. Compact forward commanders requested authorization to engage. The council hesitated. Every analysis showed the same thing. No clear target. No command vessel. No decisive strike that would not risk catastrophic escalation. The human presence was everywhere and nowhere, woven into the region like connective tissue. And still, no shots fired. Elias opened a channel. This is Elias Ward, he said calmly. You are operating within a zone we consider occupied. You have not been harmed. That is intentional. A pause followed, long enough for translators to cycle. You are interfering with lawful expansion, Kresh responded, his voice tight. We are enforcing boundaries, Elias replied. There's a difference. You expect us to withdraw. I expect you to reconsider momentum, Elias said. You came forward because nothing resisted you. Now something has. And if we push? The human operations hub grew very quiet. Then you will continue to lose initiative, Elias said. Piece by piece. Ship by ship. Without ever knowing where the pressure originates. That is a threat, Kresh said. Elias shook his head slightly, though the Admiral could not see it. No. A warning would have come earlier. This is a demonstration. The channel closed. Hours passed. No engagement followed. Compact fleet slowed. Then paused. Then, against centuries of precedent, began to reposition backward, seeking space to think. In the human hub, no one cheered. Elias exhaled slowly. They are learning, he said. That's good. Good? An analyst asked. Yes, Elias replied. Because the alternative was teaching them the hard way. Far from the boundary, deeper within the human hidden regions, dormant systems stared, not in alarm, but in readiness. Humanity had revealed only the edge of its patience. The galaxy, for the first time, was beginning to understand that restraint could be more dangerous than aggression. The withdrawal was never announced. Compact fleet formations did not broadcast a retreat order, nor did the Council issue a formal declaration. Instead, ships adjusted vectors one by one, drifting outward under the pretense of recalibration and review. To an untrained observer, it looked temporary. To Elias Ward, it looked like doctrine cracking under pressure. He stood once more in the council chamber, this time not alone. Professor Zalari occupied the observer's arc openly now, her presence no longer incidental. Across from them, Admiral Kresh's armored form was rigid, mandibles locked in a posture that signaled restraint rather than rage. Around them, counselors watched in silence, their confidence eroded not by defeat, but by uncertainty. You engineered this outcome, the Triune Moderator said. It was not an accusation. It was an acknowledgement. Elias inclined his head slightly. We anticipated it. You dismantled our forward momentum without firing a shot, another counselor said. That violates every model we rely on. That's because your models assume conflict is loud, Elias replied. We learned long ago that the most decisive actions are often invisible. Admiral Kresh leaned forward. You could have destroyed us. Yes, Elias said simply. The word carried no pride, no threat. That unsettled the room more than any boast could have. Then why didn't you? Kresh demanded. Elias did not answer immediately. He looked instead at the projection hovering above the chamber, a live map now stripped of aggressive vectors, showing distance growing where pressure had once mounted. Because annihilation teaches the wrong lesson, he said at last. It creates memory without understanding, fear without context. The Triune Moderator shifted. You speak as if you consider yourselves custodians. We consider ourselves survivors, Elias corrected. Custodianship implies ownership. We don't want the galaxy. We want room within it. Professor Zalari finally spoke. For centuries, she said, we taught that humanity failed because it could not unify. That internal division doomed it. Elias looked at her, a trace of warmth in his expression. We unified around one thing, he said. The idea that no external power would ever decide our future for us. Silence followed, thoughtful rather than tense. You hid, Kresh said. You let us believe you were gone. Yes. And all this time, the Admiral continued slowly, you watched us expand. Conquer. Absorb. Yes. Why not intervene earlier? Elias met his gaze. Because you weren't ready to hear no. That answer lingered. The Triune Moderator conferred with its counterparts, then addressed the chamber. The Compact recognizes that its expansion doctrine failed to account for non-participatory civilizations. Elias said nothing. We will amend our models, the Moderator continued. And we will acknowledge humanity as sovereign, extant, and strategically autonomous. A ripple passed through the chamber, not approval, not dissent, but recalibration. There will be boundaries, the Moderator added. Defined regions of non-expansion. That's all we asked for, Elias said. Admiral Kresh's mandibles flexed. And if another power tests those boundaries? Elias's expression hardened just enough to be unmistakable. Then they'll learn what you almost did. The meeting adjourned shortly after. As Elias left the chamber, Zalari fell into step beside him. History will need to be rewritten, she said. It always does, Elias replied. You planned for this moment centuries ago, she said. Did you plan for what comes after? Elias smiled faintly. Humans plan in layers. Some of them are still unfolding. They walked in silence for a time, past windows that looked out onto a galaxy suddenly less certain of itself. Far beyond the station, human systems powered down from active posture, slipping once more into quiet vigilance. No victory parades followed. No declarations echoed across space. Humanity did not need applause. They had achieved something rarer than dominance. They had established choice. In hidden habitats and dispersed worlds, people returned to ordinary routines, teaching, building, arguing, dreaming, secure in the knowledge that no unseen authority would arrive unchallenged. And in archives across the compact, the classification of humanity was amended. No longer extinct. No longer a cautionary tale. Instead, a single line was added beneath the entry. Civilization status, active. Disposition, patient. Recommendation, do not underestimate. Somewhere, deep within the human network, an old contingency file was quietly closed. Others remained open, just in case.